Okay, this is for Eric. Doon sa simula ng salaysay mo kanina, it struck me dahil sinabi mo si Mr. Joma Sison, sapsakan ng sinungaling, di ba?
Sa
He
Agrama
could
Commission.
lie through his teeth so easily or with ease.
In an Agrama
That's how you
Commission.
describe him. So now, my question is, could it also be possible that he was lying when he was red tagging the Makabayan, Gabriela, and so forth and so on?
He's not lying there, he is bragging. Nagyayabang siya, hindi siya nagsisinungaling. Because you want to impress to Europe that there is a very broad revolutionary movement na dulas ang dila niya. Sa sobrang pagyayabang niya, tuloy na expose niya ang itinayo nila mga
Anyway,
cover.
just an observation because you describe him as a like a pathological liar, di ba? Sabi mo, tinanong diretso, tanggi kagad. So, it just occurred to me, all of a sudden, baka nagsisinungaling din siya doon sa kanyang pagtatag. So that's all that I... okay.
Your Honor.
Would you like to respond?
Mr. Chair.
Anyway, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I saw that video on YouTube as well. I don't think we have the full footage already because that was in 1987. But my interpretation of the, I don't know if that was a lecture by Joma Sison, is that precisely he was making a distinction between the armed revolutionary movement. Ito yung sinabi niyang CPP, NPA, NDF, and the legal democratic forces, which are not armed and which operate in the legal arena. So I think, Mr. Chair, by making that distinction, Joma Sison is not saying that the CPP is controlling everything. In fact, sinasabi niya, hindi nga nila kayang ipanalo yan eh. And so there is that legal democratic forces that they also have to contend with. And I think it is important not only for him, but for us as well, to make that distinction. Otherwise, sabi nga ni Eric, lahat na ho ng sektor, in-infiltrate na ng CPP. Where do we draw the line? Where do we say that these religious people helping workers are just religious people helping workers and not CPP operatives? Sa totoo lang, may mga taga Philippine Military Academy nga na nag-NPA eh. So
I was about to say that, ano?
So that distinction, Mr. Chair, is I think important, and I think that was what Joma Sison did.
I was about to say that when Vic Corpus and eventually Tagamulila, Lieutenant Tagamulila, defected to the NPA, would that make the PMA a recruiter of the NPA? So anyway, Senate President is recognized.
I think there's something that we need to answer. No? If that is the logic, na baka naman yung sinasabi ni Joma Sison, hiwalay yung sinasabi niya at saka sa revolutionary movement na gusto niya or yung sa NPA or CPP. Why is it that the resource persons that we have here, former rebels, documented former rebels, ang pinagdaanan, hindi diretsong NPA, CPP. Ang pinagdadaanan, either nagkabataan party list or yung LFS o Gabriela or yung mga sinasabi na movements ni Joma Sison. I think that's what we need to answer.
Mr. Chair, alam niyo po, ang NPA nagre-recruit yan among the idealistic sectors of our society. And of course, their first priority for recruitment would be precisely the activists. Kasi ito yung tingin nila kayang magsakripisyo, can devote their full time to these kinds of activities. I mean, it would be strange for them to be recruiting from the business sector. Although I think they are also doing that. But, that is the nature of the revolutionary movements. Hindi lang po sa Pilipinas, I think all over the world. All the revolutionary movements, of course, they recruit primarily from these kinds of cause-oriented groups. At hindi na ho bago yan. Hindi naman natin tinatanggi na may recruitment talaga. I mean, if their experiences are to be believed, at di naman namin mapapasubalian. But I think, ang point namin dito, That does not mean that the organizations kung saan nagre-recruit ang NPA, sasabihin na natin, mga ano yan mga front yan, o mga bahagi na rin ng armado yan. That is a dangerous assumption to make, Mr. Chair. I think that is the only point.
All right. In that case, if what you're saying is accurate, if what you're saying is accurate, then General Parlade's warning is correct. It has value. Mag-ingat yung mga sumasapi kasi doon tumatarget ng NPA. Doon sa sinasabi mo na siyempre sa mga aktivista sila mag-iimbita. Hindi sila mag-iimbita direkta from just the public. Di ba? Following your logic, then may value yung sinasabi ni Parlade na mag-ingat yung mga kababayan natin, ng mga celebrities, hindi ba?
Mr. Chair, if that are mere words, I will not, we eat that for breakfast. But we look at this in the context of the operations of the NTF-LCAC, of the counter-insurgency operations. Hindi lang ho kasi salita may kasabay na, military actions, may military operations. And I think the resource persons previously already narrated their experiences na hindi lang simpleng nare-red tag yun. May kasabay yun na surveillance, may kasabay na harassment, kakasuhan ka. And that is what we call red tagging, not the simple words, but the totality of what is happening now. Now this is a systematic attack on these organizations that puts their lives in danger, their rights, their liberties also in danger. Kaya ho malaking concern sa amin. Kung salita lang ho yan, wala kaming problema. But it's more than that, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, General Speron, keep on.
Before I recognize Secretary Speron, nabanggit ko kanina si General Corpus, saka si Tagamulila, Lieutenant Tagamulila. Yun talaga masasabi namin, kami as PMayors, personal decision nila yon, sarili nila. Pero kami, nung nag-defect sila, we consider them as enemies, cavaliers but enemies, because they became enemies of the state. Ang tanong ko is, yung mga na-recruit yung mga members ng Makabayan, Anak Bayan, and so forth and so on, kinusuitan nyo ba sila na, kasi gobyerno na rin kayo Nakita nyo yung connection? Pareho tayong gobyerno because you became elected officials of the House of Representatives of Congress. So pareho yung situation natin. Are you ready to disown or denounce them? Having joined the NPA, na lumalaban sa gobyerno, armed struggle ito hindi ito yung laban sa kalye na nakipaglaban-laban sa mga issues. Ito, bakbakan ito, pumapatay ng mga sundalo, nag-extort ng pera sa mga may mga negosyo, sa mga kanayunan. Pareho tayo, we're on the same boat practically. But what I'm trying to say is, kami, immediately when they defected, we consider them as enemies because they became enemies of the state. Now, I'd like to ask you point blank. Are you in the same, do you share the same sentiment regarding your members or former members who, sabi nga nila, sumampa do sa NPA para makipaglaban na gamit ang armas? Please.
Mr. Chair, definitely we do not consider them as enemies.
Do not consider them as enemies.
They are
patay sila ng mga taong gobyerno, ng mga mayors,
they are engaged in rebellion, Mr. Chair. They are conducting or committing an illegal act. But we do not judge them to be enemies. Ang tingin namin, ginawa nila yon because hindi sila
Well,
nasasapatan.
I'm sorry to say this, but I cannot reconcile. Anyway, I will not recognize Secretary Speron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patungkol po naman doon sa PMA na may na-recruit doon o nag-defect, hindi naman mangyayari yun kung hindi nasusugan ng pagre-recruita. Dahil doon sa naging asawa din ni Lieutenant Corpus ay napapasama din sa mga aktivista. Kaya hindi nangyari lang yon na sa sarili niya, mag-join na ako, mag-defect ako. May recruitment na nangyari. Ngunit pagkatapos noon, ay wala nang sumunod. Kung may sumunod man, ay ami pa rin papatikusin. And we consider them as enemies of the Republic. Itong mga witness na naipresenta po namin, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, ay makikita naman natin na galing sa hanay ng mga NPA na nagsimula sa kabataan, LFS, etc. Ngayon, parang sinasabi ni Mr. Casino, Congressman Casino dati, na sarili na lang desisyon yun. Mangyayari ba yan kung walang nagre-recruit? Mangyayari ba yan kung walang nagsimulang napasabi sila sa organisasyon? Kaya ang tingin ko, yung kanilang pag-deny na sinasabi nilang that's their personal decision, that is simply an alibi and denying responsibility for all of this. Why are you so insistent on radicalizing the youth, and then when you see that they could be recruited, you recruit them? At ngayon, doon sa mga rally-rally ninyo, ipagmamalaki pa na yung alumnus ninyo ay naging NPA. Saan ang responsibility nyo? Part kayo ng gobyerno. O
Exactly what
nandyan lang kayo
was
dahil
saying, kasi
nagmamasquerade kayo na part ng
Secretary
gobyerno.
John, exactly what I was saying kanina. Kami, sumusweldo tayo sa gobyerno, sila sumusweldo sa gobyerno. And then, eto yung mga miyembro nila na sumampa sa NPA, na lumalaban sa gobyerno o sa Estado.
Yeah.
Kasi armed na ito eh. I'm not talking of street parliamentarians or yung mga protest rallies na sinasalihan. Iba na ito kasi laban ng giyera na ito at nagpapataya na. And that's why I was surprised doon sa sagot ni dating Congressman Teddy Casino na hindi nila pwedeng i-denounce. Kaya sabi ko, hindi ko kaya reconcile. Yes, Yusek Lorraine.
Kayo ba,
Mr. Chairman.
ask you a question, Mr. Chairman. Do you denounce the atrocities, the inhumanities done on the Filipino people by the CPP, NPA, NDF? Do you, Mr. Chairman? Do you condemn?
Sorry?
Do you condemn the atrocities that have been done against the Filipino people?
Of course.
Yes.
The NPAs who are killing civilians, who are
Yes.
killing policemen,
And yet,
who are killing military officers, who are
Yes.
killing former members who
Yes.
wanted to go back to the mainstream. Of course, I denounce them.
the grief and destruction that was caused us, brought to the people by the CPP, and yet we have the Makabayan Bloc who refuse to do this, no? And this is something that I don't think we should gloss or just shrug away. Seryoso po ito, hindi po pwedeng maliitin na ang mga kongresista mismo ay ayaw nilang kondenahin ang dapat kondenahin ng kahit na sinong Pilipino, lalo't lalo na inihalal ng ating gobyerno, ng mga taong bayan. Hindi po pwedeng
Yes,
maliitin yon.
if I was not part of government, then I'm free not to denounce them. Pwedeng may simpatya ako sa cause, but I'm with government. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Noel,
may I just
before I
may-
recognize you, si Noel muna. Then
Ah,
after Noel, ikaw.
Konting review lang po sa history ni Victor Corpus at saka ni Lieutenant Taga-Munila po sa process ng recruitment. Siguro alam nila ni Teddy Casino to. Before na naging NPA si Victor Corpus at saka si Lieutenant Taga-Munila, they were recruited as member of KM. And nung mga panahon na yun, wala pang martial law. KM was a legal organization. When Joma rendered a speech inside the PMA na may titulo, The Mercenary Tradition of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, that's the time when Lieutenant Victor Corpus and Lieutenant Tagamila was recruited as member of KM. Remember, legal pa yung KM nung panahon na yon because KM was declared underground and illegal during the implementation of martial law by President Marcos. So gaya din namin, doon yung dinaanin din naging LFS kami, then later on, na-recruit kami ng KM, na-recruit kami as candidate member of the party, then later on, naging full member of the party. Unang punto. Pangalawa po, yung sinasabi kanina ni Teddy Casino, gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, those are storylines. Yung ganun pong defense na sinasabi na personal option namin na maging NPA. But remember, Mr. Teddy Casino, ang LFS, Bayan Muna, CGP, NUSP at lahat ng mga legal organizations ay may parihong curriculum na pinag-aralan. PADEPA. Ano yung laman ng PADEPA? Yung unang kurso doon, maikling kurso hinggil sa lipunan at revolusyong Pilipino. Pinag-uusapan doon ang armadong pakikibaka. Ang ibig kong sabihin, these legal organizations are laying the ground for recruitment sa NPA. Yan yung nangyayari, kaya hindi pwedeng sabihin natin na personal option lang. Itong mga legal organization na to, yun yung naglilay ng ground. Nagsiset ng condition para itong mga tao na to ay mag-operator na maging NPA. Kaya hindi pwedeng sabihin na walang responsibility. At gaya ng sinasabi namin kanina, batay sa ibinasa na natin mga provisions ng mga official na dokumento ng partido, nasa per WC yan, yung party constitution, malinaw dyan. Sa loob ng mga legal organizations na to, nandyan yung party group na siya yung nagpo-provide ng political leadership over dito sa mga legal organizations na to. At sila yung nag-a-agitate ng mga membro na to. Kaya, ang nangyayari, recruitment muna sa legal, then later, marirecruit doon sa underground mass organization, then later, pag nag-develop sila, ayun.
Yeah, okay. Let me recognize Congressman Teddy Casino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And after that, Congressman Sarate.
Just on those points, Mr. Chair. First, just like we do not consider the members of the MILF or the MNLF as enemies, we also do not consider the members of the CPP and BANDF as enemies. They are revolutionary groups. We may not agree with their program. We may not agree with the way that they are pushing for their agenda. But ang attitude ho namin sa kanila, i-engage because we recognize that these revolutionary organizations, their struggles are rooted in very legitimate and historical grievances of our people. And para sa akin ho, to simply denounce them as enemies, it closes the door for a healthier engagement. Lalo na ho kami, we are engaged in the many issues that they are also pushing for, land reform, land leases, etc. So nasa ganong situation kami. In any case, Mr. Chair, that is our position, that we do not consider them as enemies. We consider them as fellow Filipinos na dapat kausapin. At kung pwede magkaroon ng political settlement, that is good. And if that is what we believe in, then that should be respected. Now, on the issue of recruitment, I reiterate, Mr. Chair, yung pamumundok personal na decision yan. Of course, the LFS or anak bayan, part ho ng task talaga nila is to raise the political consciousness of their constituents. Ayun ang trabaho ng aktivista eh. Talagang palawakin ng kaalaman, mulatin. And part of the reality, no, bahagi ho ng realidad sa ating bansa, may armadong labanan eh. And it is important for an activist to understand. Bakit nga ba nagre-rebelde itong mga ito?
It's 1 minute before 3. And
all right,
I don't have yet the permission of the Senate President to extend to probably another 30 minutes. So, Mr. Senate President?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I doubt if we can because yes, we will be convening past 3 already at the rate that we're going. But perhaps you can we just recognize Congressman Sarate if he wants to speak, or otherwise Nika, and then we will have to postpone for another week, Mr. President, so that we can get the reactions of both, because we are still going to disinfect. We will have to rearrange the what they call this plenary hall, and then we will have to disinfect, and that means I don't think we will be able to convene by 4 o'clock if we don't stop right away. So perhaps, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you can limit it to 1 or 2 more.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
And
Senate
then
President.
resume the week after.
Thank you, Mr. Senate President. So, on that note, Congressman Caloy is recognized. After him, DG Monteagudo, and Congresswoman
Mr. Chair,
Elago.
I'd also like to give a brief
in that order.
clarification.
Hindi tayo matatapos. So, Congressman Caloy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
You have
Chair.
the floor.
Short lang, dagdag, no? My personal belief, Mr. Chair, no? Yung mga taong nag-exercise, ang option nila ay mag-armas, no? Mahirap po na ikondina sila outright, no? Dahil naniniwala ako, my personal belief, na mayroong mga social kadahilanan ito, historical in fact, no? ang ating kasaysayan ay very rich of this kind of history, no? Panahon pa ng mga Nina Bonifacio noon at hanggang ngayon. Nabanggit ni Congressman Teddy yung usapin ng MNLF, MILF, no? Outright condemning them because they took an option to exercise the right, no, na labanan yung tingin nila ay masama sa ating lipunan. Magre-resulta lang ito, Mr. Chair, sa tingin ko ng outright denial din na merong mga roots ang armed conflict sa ating bansa, no? Condemning them will only shut the doors for potential political settlement na tinutulak din ang kinatawang ito na magbalik ang usapang pangkapayapaan dahil kinondena na natin sila, no? Na sila ay terorista, sila ay masama, therefore hindi sila dapat kausapin. Gaya na nabanggit ni Congressman Teddy, ang personal belief ko, kailangan nga i-engage natin sila para masolusyonan na natin itong mahigit 5 dekada na nangyari sa ating bayan. So yun po ang aking personal na paniniwala dyan, Mr. Chair, no? Na mas mainam tingnan natin kung ano ba ang naging ugat, bakit may mga kabataan na nagsimula silang maging aktivista, eventually they took an option to take up arms. Just like what happened in our history, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. General Monteaguda. And then after the NICA Director General, Congressman.
Thank you.